10 plants that love boggy soil and are going to be problem solvers for you in your garden. We have an area that gets super wet in the spring and in the fall. And when you walk in there, it's as if you are walking into a swamp. I struggled to grow anything in that area. So I went on a hunt looking for all the plants that can live in boggy soil, and there are tons of them. Today I'm going to share with you the ones that I'm going to be growing in that area. This is a sunny area in our garden, so all these plants that I chose are going to be to love the sun. If you guys like this video, let me know in the comments section below, and if you want another video like it for the shade. I have here a mixture of things. I have perennials and I also have shrubs, and I think these are plants that will fit in either cottage gardens or informal gardens, if that is what you are looking for. The first plant that I have in here is dogwoods. Dogwoods come in all sorts of color, and they are great because they love the water and they look good throughout all the seasons. And I mentioned them in one of my previous videos about the plants that look good in all 4 seasons. You can check it out after this video. They produce flowers and they produce berries that the birds can enjoy if you do not cut them back too hard, because they do bloom on old wood. And they also have beautiful bark color on them and beautiful foliage, and of course they love the water. And they are super hardy. I will put the hardiness zone of the plants over here. I'm not going to even attempt to mention what hardiness zone they grow in, because I always forget what hardiness zones the plants grow in, but I do know it's a super hardy plant. Since we started with shrubs, so let's continue with shrubs. The next shrub that I have is hydrangeas, and hydrangeas can live in both sun and shade. There are varieties that can only tolerate the shade, or more like part shade. They do need a little bit of sun, but if you are in a southern climate, you do have to protect them and put them in a more shady location. However, the panicle hydrangeas can tolerate all day sun, and you just want to make sure to give them lots of water. And since you are planting them in a boggy location, that's not going to be a problem. And this is why I chose hydrangeas, because they do love the water, and if you have them in the sun, they are going to love you even more. With those 2 combinations between the sun and the water, that's going to allow them to produce a lot of blooms. Some of them also have blooms that change bloom color according to the pH of your soil, so they vary from blue or purple to pinks, and some of them are whites. And most hydrangeas that are white do change color eventually and turn into kind of pinks and reds and these sort of colors, and they are super beautiful. They are one of my favorite shrubs, and I'm planning on adding tons of hydrangeas everywhere in our garden. Our garden is probably going to be filled with hydrangeas everywhere because I'm a little bit addicted to them. And they are also super hardy. If you live in a cold climate like we do, you just want to make sure to probably get the hydrangeas that bloom on the new wood or new and old wood, because the ones that bloom on old wood might not bloom for you every season if you do get a hard frost, if you don't protect them, or if you have deer chewing on them, which we do have both. You just have to place the plants in the proper location, and this is why choosing plants for the proper location. If you have boggy soil, choose plants for boggy soil so that your plants can thrive in that environment. They have ones that also rebloom. I have one of them. It's going to bloom probably in the earlier summer and then probably in the later fall, and those will also bloom on new and old. The next plant that I have in here are grasses. I have 2 types of grasses that I'm going to be adding to that garden, and that is switchgrass and purple love grass. And those are really beautiful grasses. You have a variety of grasses. Grasses are always going to love the water, and some of them probably might not love the water as much as others, but mostly grasses do enjoy a lot of water, and it's going to allow them to put tons of growth on. But you do have to be sort of cautious with grasses, because some of them tend to spread a lot more if they have that kind of environment. So I'm going to try it out and see. If I see that these grasses start to spread everywhere, then I will dig them up and plant them somewhere else, because I don't want them taking over that area. Grasses can look really beautiful on their own, but they are not the only thing that I want in there. I want to have beautiful blooms and structures, and this is why I chose grasses also, because grasses add this kind of breezy texture and allows you to kind of feel the wind in the garden. It allows you to experience that element, and Also, they're sort of see-through, so you can plant them in front of things that are maybe their height or a little bit shorter than them, and you can still see through them if you choose the right grasses there. That is, like grasses like the miscanthus, those are absolutely enormous and will block every plant behind them, so you won't be able to enjoy your plants. And you want to make sure to provide your plants with the proper lighting as well. This is why you have to kind of choose what to plant. The heights of the plants have to kind of be controlled because of that, so that you're not blocking the sunlight for other plants that are around them. So I think that's the third plant. So let's move on to the fourth plant that I have on the list, and that is Siberian Iris. Yes, Siberian irises. There are other irises that enjoy water. I think Dutch iris enjoys the water as well, but Siberian iris, they grow, I think, alongside of water streams, and they can grow, I believe, directly in the water if you have a pond or something like that. I haven't tried it myself, but I'm going to be planting some Siberian iris in that area as well because of that. And they are super hardy, from their name, of course. You know that those are super hardy plants, and I believe they come in a variety of colors as well, and they bloom sort of in the mid-spring about that time. I have a lot of them in the front over here behind these windows, and they are absolutely gorgeous, but I think they will do much better if I plant them in a boggy location. The foliage is sort of strappy, grass-like foliage. I personally love it, but I think that if you have too much of it, it's going to kind of look messy. So if you don't like that type of foliage, just make sure to plant them maybe behind something else that has more structure to it within the foliage department. This way you can enjoy the blooms in the spring, and then as the plants grow, they will cover the grassy foliage type texture. Because I think that if you were to plant bulbs in those locations, not a lot of bulbs do well in that kind of environment. They would probably be susceptible to diseases in that kind of environment, like for example daffodils and tulips. They would probably have fusarium or fusarium. I always confuse it. It's one of those words, fusarium or fusarium. I'm not sure. It's a root rot, basically. I'll write it over here on the screen because I can't remember the word. So those bulbs can suffer from that type of environment, and the Siberian iris kind of is an in-between plant that sort of look like the bulbs, and the effect that it blooms in the spring. It has the tall stalks, and it also has a strappy foliage as well. But the foliage does not die on it. It stays green throughout the season. And if you do cut it back, you're basically taking the energy source of that plant. And this is why I say if you don't like that texture, just make sure to plant it in behind something to cover the foliage of the plant. The fifth plant I have on the list is Ostrich Fern. Ferns in general are going to love the water, but if you have a sunny location, I think that the Ostrich Fern is going to be one of those plants that is going to be able to take the sun. It might scorch a little bit, maybe if you don't have enough water in that area. Maybe you thought you have enough water, but maybe you go through a drought season and that area is not receiving enough water, then you might want to provide it with supplemental watering. But if it's truly a boggy location, then the Ostrich Ferns are going to do great in that location. I'm going to also be adding some. I had a different plan in that area, and then I changed it. I really want to plant astilbe in there, even though it's sunny. And I know astilbe is not one of those plants that love the sun. They prefer the shade. But I'm still going to try it out, and I'll let you know, guys, if it's going to work out or not. If it's not, I'll be really sad, but I'll move them somewhere else. But they do love the water. Anyways, astilbes are in the shade department, so let's not talk about them so much. But basically, ostrich ferns are going to do great in that location, and they are also super hardy. And I believe that ostrich ferns are also edible. Don't quote me on that. If I know more about them, I'll look them up and see. Maybe I'll put some information over here for you guys. I think they do make those what are they called? Friends? I forgot the name. It's these little curly things that you see in the grocery stores early in the spring. And I think there are other ferns that are edible as well, but I believe ostrich ferns is one of them. The sixth plant I have on the list is turtle heads. And turtle heads, it's a beautiful plant. It has beautiful purplish kind of blooms, lavender sort of blooms, and it's a little bit kind of out of the ordinary, I feel like, but it has beautiful foliage on it. And the bloom stalks are not exactly kind of lustrous and full, but they do produce these beautiful dainty blooms. It sort of reminds me of what's it called, snapdragons and these kind of plants, but they're not as full, so they kind of bloom from the bottom and they have a tall stalk, but the flowers that are on the bottom kind of fade away and the plant just keeps producing flowers all throughout the stalk as the flowers on the bottom die back. So it's not going to be as showy as some other flowers, but it does love the sun and it does love the boggy soil. I think it is really beautiful. I'm kind of downselling it, really, but it's downselling it. Is that the proper way of saying it? I don't know. I'm not giving it its the glory that it should receive, really, but it is a really beautiful plant. And I will be putting pictures of all these plants up on the screen so that you guys can see them and see what I'm talking about. It's also super hardy and it's going to play out really well with the strappy type foliage like the grasses and the irises, because it has the big foliage on it that's going to cover up your strappy type foliage. The next plant that I have on the list is, or is that the 6th plant, did I say? I think now we're on the 7th plant. So the 7th plant that I have on the list is Japanese primrose. So I've never grown this before and I'm really curious as to how it's going to look like. I've seen some pictures on it and I've seen some pictures of it and it looks really beautiful and I really want to grow it. And the foliage on it, of course, if you've seen primrose foliage, it's super beautiful. It's kind of velvety and it has bold foliage as well on it, and it's going to bloom in the spring. So the tricky thing about this is that a lot of these plants do bloom in the spring, and I was having a hard time finding plants that love the sun and bloom throughout the whole season and not just in the spring. And this is why I'm going to also incorporate some plants that I'm not exactly sure that they do, if they do well in those kind of conditions. Like, for example, one of the plants that I'm going to be incorporating is delphinium, because I think it's going to provide that extra height and color, and I will see how it does in there, if it's going to love that kind of environment or not, but we'll try it out and see. Now we're on the 8th plant that I have on the list is Joe Pye weed, and it is a beautiful plant. It's really tall. Well, some of them do actually come now in shorter, a little bit shorter, so you can put them a little bit in the front, but typically Joe Pye weed is a super tall plant, so you want to plant it in the back of the border. And I believe they are also native to our area over here. We live in New Hampshire. I've seen them around in natural habitats. And some of them, though, that I've seen are sort of shorter, and maybe that's just because they're not receiving the sun that they need or the water that they need, not exactly, or the nutrients that they need. But they do grow super tall and they have beautiful flowers on them. I do believe they also have a beautiful scent, and they draw in the pollinators like crazy. The monarchs, all the butterflies love them, and the hummingbirds. So those are great pollinator attractors, and that actually blooms in the summer, I think. Not exactly sure. I'll put the bloom time over here as well. And they are super hardy plants. The 9th plant that I have on the list is the blue insomnia, or any insomnia. I chose the blue insomnia because that's the one I want. But insomnia. I hope I'm saying that right. Insomnia. That's something that I struggle with. I find it ironic that I'm going to be putting that in my garden. But anyways, I'm going to be putting that also in the garden. Insomnia comes in, I think, different heights and textures as well. And some of them are fuller than others. Some are really tall, about like 5 feet tall, and some are short. They're going to be maybe about 18 inches tall or so. And they do love the water, and they are also a hardy plant. And I believe they bloom in the summer. I'm not exactly sure on not. I didn't come very prepared, I guess, but it's so hard to remember all this information. I should have probably written them down on the paper next to this page over here that I made so that I can kind of see. I'm still not done with the design over here, just kind of like, I don't know, pencil and coloring pencils, and my coloring pencils are not really great. I don't know where I put my good coloring pencils, so the colors are sort of faded and not great. But anyways, I think now we are on the 10th plant on the list. Okay, what is the 10th plant on the list? I'm having a hard time seeing over here. Oh yes, how could I forget that? It's the obedient plant. So the obedient plant, unlike its name, it's actually not very obedient at all. It kind of spreads. So you have to be careful with this plant because it does have the tendencies to spread, and especially if you put it in an environment that it likes, like the boggy environment. And those plants also come in a variety of colors, and they have tall bloom stalks. And the reason why it's called obedient plant is not because it obeys in the garden and it doesn't spread. That's not why. It's the reason why it's called the obedient plant is because you can bend the bloom stalks however way you want, and the plant will stay in that shape. So that's something that's super cool about it. And I believe it also has beautiful foliage on it. I don't have it yet, but I did start some seeds of the obedient plant. I think I planted the white color obedient plant. So we'll see how well it obeys in there. I'm gonna try it and see. If it does spread a little bit, I might not mind it, because right now I can't add in all the plants in that area. It's a really big area and I won't be able to fill it up very quickly because that would be super expensive. I'm also starting a lot of the seeds myself. I did start some, so I have the iris already, so I can just add that in there. I know I'll have to purchase some plants to fill in. I'll probably start the Joe Pye weed from seed and maybe the switchgrass. I did start the purple love grass from seed, so I can start a lot of these plants from seed already, and I won't have to pay tons of money just to have a beautiful garden in there. So I'm going to share one more plant that I didn't share because it's not necessarily the case that it loves boggy soil, but it is doing great in that area of our garden, and that is blueberries. So I have 2 different varieties of blueberries planted in that location, and the reason why I planted the blueberries in there is because, one, their foliage looks absolutely gorgeous, especially in the fall when the plants are turning color. They turn this beautiful, gorgeous scarlet red color, and I love them so much in that area. They also produce these little beautiful dainty flowers on them, and they look beautiful in the spring as well. And of course the blueberries, I mean, they're gorgeous and they are edible and delicious. They seem to be doing really well in that area, and I think that's because it does dry out in the summer, and I do have to provide that area with some supplemental watering. Now, there are so many other plants other than these for the sun that I didn't mention, but the reason why I didn't mention them is because they're kind of weedy. I mean, I did mention the obedient plant, but the other plants are sort of like marsh marigold, arrowhead, what's it called? Horsetail, I think. It looks sort of like asparagus, but it's not asparagus, it's wild. And maybe it might be in the same family as asparagus, I don't know, but it does have medicinal benefits to it. In fact, I do have asparagus in the area that doesn't get so wet, close to that area. So I do have some asparagus in there. But anyways, other plants are pitcher plants, but I don't want to put pitcher plants in there because we have bees, and I don't want the pitcher plants eating my bees. That would be a sad day. This is why I changed my plans. I had other plants planned for that area, then I had to change it all up because one, I wanted sort of more structure. I felt like I didn't have like the shrubs and all that I needed in that area, and 2, because I didn't want the bees to die because those plants are going to eat it, and also I didn't want it to get weedy. So this is why I did not include these plants in there, and they're not part of the 10 plants that I recommend adding in a boggy area. If you want to learn about more plants to add into your garden, click on this video over here.